For more on the president's meeting with Pope Francis, we turn to Candida Moss, theology professor at the University of Notre Dame. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So, as we saw in Margaret's piece there, these two men have been seen as outsiders. So there's a couple of interesting dynamics here. They're both seen as outsiders. They're both seen as men who have made their mark in ways that are different from their predecessors. On the other hand, they've clashed. Certainly when President Trump was candidate Trump, they clashed on a number of issues, including refugees and including, even I just saw recently, the Cardinal Peter Turkson, who is a Ghanaian, we've talked about him a lot. He's a top Vatican official. He tweeted, Pope Francis and President Trump reach out to Islam world to exercise it of real violence. One offers peace of dialogue, the other security of arms, referencing that big arms deal that we made in Saudi Arabia.
Right, and that was just last night that he tweeted that. So certainly coming into this meeting, they couldn't disagree more on the issues. The things that they have in common, the common ground they said they were going to try and find, they did talk about. They talked about interreligious dialogue. They talked about Christians in the Middle East and persecution, and they did talk about peace. But in the Vatican statement that came out of this meeting, the Vatican did say they were going to continue to seek serene collaborations between the U.S. government and the Catholic Church here in the United States on immigration and education and healthcare, precisely the issues that they've clashed on in the past.
Now, no one was in the room, aside from translators, when the two men met for a half hour. And so we're left analyzing every little thing. Body language, the number of minutes they spent talking, the gifts they exchanged. Based on all of these tiny things, would you call this meeting a success?
Well, we don't want to read too much into Pope Francis's body language, which is what everyone is doing. And we have to bear in mind that this was a very impromptu meeting that was sort of scheduled at the last minute. I would say that it's a success in terms of finding common ground and an initial dialogue. But it really remains to be seen where they go from here. Once they're no longer in the room with one another, will President Trump be talking about this as fantastic and the Pope as incredible, or will he go back to taking shots at the leader of the Catholic Church?
You know, it's interesting. We were talking about this yesterday in anticipation of this visit. When President Trump traveled to Saudi Arabia, he offered something to the Saudis. That was that arms deal. When he traveled to Israel, he offered again the staunch ally that the United States has always presented itself to Israel, and also attacked very heavily Iran, which is something that the Israelis are always looking for some support on. Here, the Pope isn't necessarily looking for anything from President Trump, or is he?
Well, he would like to see a commitment on immigration. He would like to see further commitments on pro-life measures here in the United States. And of course, he is deeply concerned about persecution in the Middle East. And that's probably where they have the most common ground. And they did talk about that. But beyond that, there isn't the same kind of political
Quid
gesture.
pro quo,
That's right.
You know, the other thing that a lot of people have been talking about online, and we sort of discussed it, is Melania and Ivanka. They both had head coverings on. It's something that they did not do in Saudi Arabia. I'm Catholic, and I cannot recall the last time anybody sort of covered their head, maybe First Communion. But you really don't need to do that anymore, at least in the Catholic Church. Can you explain what that was about?
Right. So traditionally, women did cover their head in the Catholic Church, but that really stopped happening in the 50s. And by the 70s, it was pretty much all gone. You'll occasionally see one, probably an elderly woman.
My grandma, I was going to say my grandmother, still staunchly veil-tastic.
That's right. This is the traditional garb for meeting the Pope, but it does stand in contrast to his behavior in Saudi Arabia. And that says something about his so-called tour of the world's 3 major religions, that he's treating these groups differently. And it's surprising because this is Pope Francis. This is someone who does not stand on ceremony. And you have to wonder, is this even the kind of gesture he really appreciates?
Very interesting.
All right, Candida Moss, always great to have you. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks.